The rain hammered down like judgment from the heavens, turning the cracked asphalt of Willow Creek into a slick mirror of despair. Olivia Harper stood on the sagging porch of her weathered farmhouse, arms wrapped tight around her soaked cardigan, watching the drops punch through the holes in her roof. Inside, her small living room was a battlefield of buckets catching the leaks, the air thick with the musty scent of mildew and forgotten dreams. At 32, Olivia had come back to this place after her mother's passing, hoping to mend the fractures of a life spent chasing stability in the city. But the town had other ideas. Whispers followed her like shadows. Poor Olivia, still dreaming of her fairy tale while the world laughs. It wasn't just the roof failing her. It was the isolation, the endless parade of pitying glances from neighbors who saw her single status as a punchline. That afternoon, as thunder rolled in from the distant hills, the mockery hit its cruelest note. She'd posted a simple ad on the local bulletin board at the diner. Roof repair needed, will trade baking or honest work. By evening, the responses trickled in, not with offers of help, but with jeers. Tommy Reynolds, the burly mechanic from the garage, had led the charge, his voice booming across the counter as a cluster of locals chuckled. Olivia wants love. Honey, with that leaky shack, you're lucky if a stray dog sticks around. His words sliced deeper than the storm outside, echoing the years of letdowns, divorces in her family, jobs that vanished like smoke. A heart that yearned for connection in a place that prized solitude over sentiment. She fled the diner with cheeks burning, the rain masking her tears as she drove home, vowing to fix the roof herself come morning. Pride was all she had left. But dawn brought no relief. The sky hung low and grey, the wind whipping through the eaves like accusatory whispers. Olivia climbed the ladder with a hammer and tarp in hand, her boots slipping on the wet rungs, the metallic tang of fear mixing with the earthy petrichor rising from the fields. She was no stranger to hard labour, nights waitressing, days tending the small garden that barely fed her, but this felt like tempting fate. One gust, and she teetered, the ladder wobbling against the rotting shingles. Below, the mud churned, waiting to swallow her whole. That's when the rumble started, low and primal, vibrating through the ground like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. From the horizon, a lone figure cut through the mist on a battered Harley, its chrome gleaming dully under the overcast sky. Ethan Caldwell rode with the quiet authority of a man who'd seen too many roads and too few reasons to stop. At 40, he bore the scars of a life in the wind. Tattoos faded from sun and rain, a jaw set like forged steel, eyes shadowed by the ghosts of promises unkept. He'd been part of the Iron Vow crew, a tight-knit band of riders bound by oaths forged in the fires of lost battles. But lately he'd been riding solo, haunted by the vow he'd made to his late brother: protect the vulnerable, no matter the cost. Willow Creek was just a pit stop, a detour from the endless highway, until the sight of the woman on the ladder pulled him in like gravity. He killed the engine at the base of the drive, the sudden silence amplifying the storm's fury. Olivia froze midway up, peering down through the drizzle. Ethan dismounted, his leather jacket shedding water like a duck's feathers, and tilted his head back. "Ma'am, that's a recipe for disaster up there. Mind if I lend a hand?" His voice was gravelly, laced with the faint drawl of southern highways, but there was no pity in it, only the steady resolve of someone who'd fixed more than roofs in his time. She hesitated, the hammer heavy in her grip, memories of the diner's laughter flashing like lightning. "I can manage. Don't need charity." But the ladder creaked ominously, and Ethan's gaze didn't waver. He wasn't the type to push. Instead, he nodded toward his bike, where a toolkit was strapped tight. "Not charity, just a fellow traveler seeing a fellow traveler in a bind. Name's Ethan, and that roof's got about 5 minutes before it claims you." Something in his tone, unforced, like the steady drip of rain, cracked her defenses. She descended, mud splashing at her feet, and watched as he assessed the damage with practiced eyes. The shingles were curled like old parchment, the underlay rotted through from years of neglect. Without another word, Ethan hauled his gear up, his boots finding purchase where hers had slipped. The work began in earnest. Nails driven with rhythmic thuds, tarps unfurled against the wind, his hands calloused and sure. Olivia stood below, handing up tools, the scent of wet leather and motor oil mingling with the storm's clean wash. For the first time in months, the air felt less oppressive, charged instead with possibility. As the morning wore on, fragments of conversation bridged the gaps. "What brings a rider like you to a nowhere town like this?" she asked, passing a roll of roofing felt. Ethan paused, wiping sweat from his brow, the rain now a light mist. Chasing echoes mostly, made a promise once to look out for folks who stand alone. "You." She shared bits of her story, the return home, the mockery that stung worse than solitude. He listened, not interrupting, his presence a quiet anchor amid the creaking beams. By noon, the worst leaks were patched, the roof holding firm against the easing skies. Ethan descended, tools clinking, and surveyed his work with a nod. "That'll buy you time, but it'll need more than a band-aid long-term." Olivia's eyes met his, gratitude warring with the walls she'd built. "Why help? You don't even know me." He shrugged, a faint smile cracking his weathered face. "Sometimes that's the point, keeps the promises alive." In that moment, as the sun pierced the clouds, casting golden shafts over the farmhouse, Olivia felt a shift, like the first clear note after a discordant storm. Little did she know, this stranger's intervention was no random act. It was the spark of a bond that would challenge her doubts, unravel hidden truths, and prove that love, mocked or not, could roof the deepest wounds. But for now, as Ethan revved his engine and nodded farewell, the road ahead whispered of journeys yet to unfold. The afternoon sun slanted through the freshly mended eaves of the farmhouse, painting the kitchen floor in warm, dappled patterns that chased away the morning's gloom. Olivia wiped her hands on a flour-dusted apron, the scent of rising bread dough filling the air like a tentative olive branch. The roof held, no drips, no ominous patter against the pots she'd scattered earlier. It was a small victory, but in Willow Creek, where every repair felt like defiance against the town's indifferent grind, it carried weight. She glanced out the window toward the empty driveway, where Ethan's Harley had idled just hours before, its exhaust a fading ghost in the mist. His words lingered, "Keeps the promises alive." Simple, unadorned, yet they stirred something dormant in her chest. A flicker of trust she'd long buried under layers of sarcasm and self-reliance. She busied herself with the oven, sliding in loaves that would be her trade for whatever favors the town might yet offer. But as the dough baked, her mind wandered back to the diner, to Tommy Reynolds' booming laugh and the chorus of snickers that had followed her out the door. Fairy tale dreamer, they'd called her, as if wanting more than a solitary life was a crime. Olivia had always been the quiet one, the girl who believed in second chances, even after her father's abandonment and her mother's slow fade into illness. Returning to the farm had been her way of honoring that belief, piecing together a home from splintered wood and faded memories. Yet the isolation gnawed, amplified by neighbors who mistook her hope for naivety. A knock at the door jolted her from the reverie, sharp and unexpected against the hum of the countryside. She opened it to find Mrs. Harlan from down the road, her silver hair pinned back under a wide-brimmed hat, clutching a basket of eggs. The older woman's eyes, sharp as polished pebbles, flicked upward to the roof. "Heard the rumble of a bike this morning. Fixed that mess up there, did he?" There was no malice in her tone, just the blunt curiosity of small-town grapevines. Olivia nodded, stepping aside to let her in. Stranger passing through. Wouldn't take no for an answer. Mrs. Harlan set the basket on the counter, her gaze lingering on the rising loaves. "Good thing. That ladder of yours is a widow-maker, but mind yourself, riders like that come and go like the wind. Don't let a kind deed spin your head." The warning landed soft but firm, laced with the wisdom of decades, watching dreams wash away in the creek. Olivia forced a smile, trading a warm loaf for the eggs, but as her neighbor departed, the words settled like dust on her skin. Was that all Ethan was? A fleeting fix, gone before the next storm? Dusk crept in early, the sky bruising purple over the fields as Olivia stepped onto the porch, a mug of chamomile steaming in her hands. The air carried the crisp bite of cooling earth, mingled with the faint, lingering trace of motor oil from Ethan's toolkit. She replayed their exchange, the way his hands moved with quiet precision, not showy, but assured, like a man who'd mended more than structures. His story fragments had been sparse, echoes, promises to a brother gone too soon. It mirrored her own losses, unspoken parallels that made the silence between them feel companionable rather than awkward. The rumble returned just as the first stars pricked the horizon, deeper this time, accompanied by the low growl of multiple engines. Olivia's heart quickened, her mug nearly slipping from her grasp. From the gravel path, a convoy emerged, not the lone wolf of morning, but a ragged line of 5 bikes, their headlights cutting through the twilight like beacons. Ethan led them, his silhouette unmistakable, flanked by riders whose leathers bore faded patches of an emblem she couldn't quite make out, a vow etched in iron, perhaps. They pulled up in a loose arc, engines cutting off one by one, the sudden quiet amplifying the chirp of crickets and the whisper of wind through the corn. Ethan dismounted first, helmet tucked under his arm, his face etched with the day's miles. "Hope I'm not intruding. These are some of the crew, folks who heard about the roof and figured extra hands couldn't hurt." He gestured to the group. A wiry man with a salt and pepper beard, a younger rider with a scar tracing his jaw, and others who nodded politely, their postures relaxed but vigilant. One woman, her hair cropped short and tattoos peeking from her sleeves, offered a small wave. "Name's Riley. We carry supplies for fixes like this. No strings." Olivia blinked, the gesture overwhelming in its simplicity. The town had mocked her plea for help. Yet here were strangers, drawn by a single act of kindness, ready to shore up her world. "I didn't expect this. Come in, at least for coffee." They filed into the yard, tools and tarps unloaded with efficient grace, the air buzzing with murmured plans for tomorrow's work. Over steaming mugs in the kitchen, stories unfolded in fits and starts. Ethan spoke of the iron vow, a loose brotherhood born from shared scars, veterans, wanderers, all bound by a pact to stand for the overlooked. "My brother started it," he said quietly, eyes on the steam rising from his cup. "Lost him in a wreck years back. Swore I'd carry the torch. Saw you up there today, and it hit like one of his reminders." The group shared nods, their loyalty a tangible thread weaving through the room. Riley recounted a similar call in another town, helping a widow whose home the bank eyed hungrily. "It's not about the glory," she said, her voice steady. "Just keeping word in a world that forgets." Olivia listened, the warmth of the kitchen seeping into her bones, thawing the chill of isolation. For the first time, the farmhouse felt less like a relic of defeat and more like a gathering point. As night deepened, the crew bedded down in tents pitched in the side yard, the soft glow of a campfire flickering against the barn. Olivia retired to her room, the ceiling above solid and unyielding, a metaphor she couldn't shake. Lying in the dark, she traced the day's turns in her mind, the mockery that had bruised her, the unexpected alliance that mended more than wood. Ethan's presence lingered, not intrusive, but steady, like the distant hum of engines fading into dreams. Yet doubt whispered, could this bond withstand the town's prying eyes, or the secrets Ethan carried like hidden cargo? Outside, under a canopy of stars, Ethan stared into the fire, the crackle of embers mirroring the unrest in his chest. Helping Olivia had rekindled old vows, but it stirred deeper currents, a pull toward her quiet strength that challenged his solitary path. The road had been his companion for years, but tonight it felt like just the beginning of a ride that might demand more than miles. As the flames danced, casting shadows on the patched roof, the night held its breath, promising trials that would test not just shingles, but souls. The morning light filtered through the dew-kissed leaves of the old oak, casting elongated shadows across the yard where the Iron Vow crew stirred from their tents. The air hummed with the low murmur of voices and the clink of metal as tools were gathered, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and smouldering campfire embers. Olivia emerged from the farmhouse, a tray of fresh biscuits balanced in her hands, steam rising like fragile hopes into the crisp dawn. Her steps were tentative, the hem of her jeans brushing against wild grass that whispered secrets to the wind. Last night's gathering had left her unsettled, not with fear, but with a warmth that bordered on vulnerability, like sunlight piercing a long, sealed window. Ethan was already up, crouched by his Harley, wiping down the chrome with a rag that smelled faintly of oil and distant roads. He straightened as she approached, his eyes meeting hers, with that same unhurried steadiness, the faint lines around them deepening in the soft glow. "Morning. Sleep all right?" His voice cut through the quiet, rough-edged but kind, like gravel smoothed by a river's patience. "Better than I have in weeks," Olivia admitted, setting the tray on a makeshift table of crates. The crew gathered round, Riley with her quick smile, the wiry, bearded man named Marcus cracking jokes about the best camp breakfast this side of the county line, and the others nodding in quiet appreciation. They ate in companionable rhythm, the biscuits flaking warm and buttery, a simple feast that bridged the gap between strangers. For Olivia, it was more than food. It was the first time the farmhouse had echoed with laughter untainted by pity, a sound that filled the cracks in her resolve. As the sun climbed higher, the work resumed with purposeful energy. Ladders leaned against the house like sentinels, and the roof transformed under skilled hands, shingles aligned in neat rows, seams sealed against future storms. Olivia joined in where she could, hauling bundles of materials, her muscles aching in a way that felt alive, not burdensome. From atop the peak, Ethan called down instructions, his silhouette framed against the vast blue sky, sweat beading on his brow like morning dew. "Hand me that pry bar. Easy now, it's got a bite." Their glances lingered longer than necessary, charged with unspoken questions, the wind tugging at her hair as if urging her forward. By midday, the crew broke for lunch under the oak's sprawling branches, the shade a cool respite from the climbing heat. Stories flowed freer now, laced with the salt of hard-won truths. Marcus spoke of a vow he'd made during a long-ago deployment, promising a comrade to watch over his family if the worst came. Kept it too, rode cross-country to fix their fence after he was gone. Iron Vow ain't just patches, it's blood and word. Riley nodded, her fingers tracing a faded tattoo on her wrist, a simple chain link, symbol of bonds unbroken. Olivia listened, her back against the rough bark, feeling the weight of their loyalty like a mantle she hadn't earned but desperately wanted. Ethan sat beside her, close enough that the warmth of his arm brushed hers, a subtle anchor amid the tales. "Your turn," he said softly, when the others drifted to refill plates. "What's the promise that brought you back here? Not just the farm, the real one." His gaze held no demand, only the quiet invitation of someone who'd learned to wait out silences. She hesitated, the words catching like thorns in her throat. The town's mockery echoed faintly, the diner's jeers, the neighbors' sidelong glances that painted her as a fool for craving connection. "My mom. Before she passed, she made me swear I'd make this place a home again. Not just survive it, but live in it. With someone, maybe. But Willow Creek, they see hope as a weakness. Her voice trailed, vulnerability exposed like fresh mortar, but Ethan's nod was immediate, affirming. Sounds like a vow worth keeping. World's full of cynics, but that don't make 'em right. He paused, his hand resting briefly on hers, calluses rough against her skin. A touch that sent a quiet spark through the haze of doubt. In that moment the oak's leaves rustled overhead, as if the land itself approved, the distant call of a hawk underscoring the fragile bridge building between them. The afternoon brought an unexpected shadow. As the crew wrapped the final sections, a pickup truck rumbled up the drive, dust billowing in its wake like an ill-tempered cloud. Tommy Reynolds stepped out, his bulk filling the doorway of the cab, flanked by two buddies from the garage, faces Olivia recognized from the diner's chorus of laughs. His eyes narrowed at the bikes lined up like guardians, the roof now a sturdy testament to outsiders' hands. "What's this? Olivia's calling in the cavalry now? Thought you handled your own messes?" His tone dripped with false joviality, but the undercurrent was sharp, laced with the town's proprietary grudge against anything that disrupted their easy judgments. The crew tensed subtly, Marcus setting down his hammer with deliberate slowness, Riley crossing her arms, but Ethan stepped forward, his stance unyielding as weathered oak. "Just lending a hand, friend. Roof's solid now. No harm in that?" Tommy's gaze flicked to Olivia, a smirk twisting his features. "Heard you put out that ad. Desperate times, huh? Careful who you invite in. Some folks fix roofs, others just stir trouble." The words hung heavy, aimed to isolate her once more, to remind her of the town's invisible fences. Olivia's cheeks flushed, but she met his stare, bolstered by the circle of riders behind her. "Trouble? Or just kindness you wouldn't know? The roof's fixed, Tommy. That's more than words." The crew murmured agreement, a low rumble that matched their engines, and Tommy backed off with a scoff, truck tires spitting gravel as he retreated. The air cleared, but the encounter left a residue of unease, a reminder that bonds forged in quiet could draw storms from the familiar. As evening fell, the crew packed up, promising to check back in a few days once materials arrived for the full overhaul. Handshakes and nods exchanged, they mounted their bikes, engines roaring to life in a symphony that vibrated through Olivia's chest. Ethan lingered last, helmet in hand, the sunset gilding his profile in amber. "You held your ground today. That's no small thing." His eyes searched hers, a depth there that spoke of roads not yet traveled, of promises evolving into something personal. "Thanks to you, all of you," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her pulse. He nodded, swinging a leg over the saddle, but before revving away he added, "This ain't over. Vows like ours, they pull you back." The convoy faded into the twilight, taillights winking like distant stars, leaving Olivia on the porch with the scent of exhaust and fresh tar. The farmhouse stood taller now, but so did she, heart open to the possibility that love, once mocked, might ride in on the wind, unbidden and true. Yet as shadows lengthened, a quiet tension stirred. Tommy's visit hinted at deeper currents in Willow Creek, whispers of old grudges that could test the fragile alliance blooming under her roof. The twilight deepened into a velvet shroud over Willow Creek, the farmhouse's silhouette standing resolute against the encroaching night, its newly fortified roof a quiet defiance etched against the stars. Olivia lingered on the porch, the wooden boards creaking softly under her weight, the faint residue of tar and engine oil clinging to the air like a promise half remembered. The convoy's taillights had long vanished down the winding road, but their echo thrummed in her veins, a rhythmic pulse that matched the quickening beat of her heart. Ethan's parting words, "Vows like ours, they pull you back," hung in the cooling breeze, stirring leaves that rustled like whispered confessions. For the first time, the isolation of the farm felt less like a cage and more like a threshold, teetering on the edge of something profound. Inside, the kitchen glowed with the soft amber of a single lamp, casting long shadows that danced across the checkered linoleum. Olivia poured herself a cup of tea, the steam curling upward like tentative fingers reaching for clarity. The encounter with Tommy replayed in her mind. His smirk, the gravel spat from his tires, the way his buddies had lingered in the truck cab, eyes narrowed like hawks sizing up prey. It wasn't just mockery anymore. It carried the weight of territorial warning, as if her small act of reaching out had trespassed on some unspoken code of the town. Willow Creek had always been a place of quiet resentments, where old families like the Reynolds held sway through favors and unspoken threats, guarding their version of order against outsiders or anyone daring to dream beyond the muddied fields. She sank into a chair at the scarred oak table, her fingers tracing the grain as if it held answers. Memories surfaced unbidden, her mother's frail hand in hers during those final days, extracting the vow to reclaim the farm, not as a burden, but as a legacy of resilience. "Love finds the steadfast live," she'd whispered, her voice a fragile thread against the hospital's sterile hum. But steadfastness had brought only jeers, until Ethan's arrival cracked the facade. Now, with the iron vow's shadow lingering, Olivia wondered if that vow could extend beyond blood, to strangers who rode in like guardians from a forgotten tale. The phone on the wall jangled suddenly, its shrill ring slicing through the quiet like a warning shot. Olivia's hand trembled as she lifted the receiver, the cord twisting in her grip. Harper residence. A pause, then a gravelly voice she recognized all too well, Tommy's, laced with false camaraderie. "Evening, Olivia. Just checking in. Saw those bikers tearing up your drive. You stirring up trouble with that crowd? Town council's got eyes on strays like them. Could complicate things for your little ad or that farm of yours." The implication slithered through the line, heavy with the town's underbelly, permits withheld, whispers to inspectors. The slow squeeze of isolation turned hostile. Her pulse raced, the tea cooling untouched. "It's my roof, Tommy. Fixed it fair and square. What's it to you?" He chuckled, low and mocking, the sound grating like rusted hinges. "Just looking out. Folks talk, say you're chasing fairy tales with rough types. Don't want you getting hurt is all." The line went dead, leaving a hollow buzz that echoed her rising unease. Olivia replaced the receiver, her reflection in the darkened window fractured and wary. Was this the deeper current Ethan had unwittingly stirred? Willow Creek's justice wasn't poetic. It was pragmatic, doled out by men like Tommy who profited from the status quo, mechanics fixing what they broke, council votes swayed by backroom deals. Her hope for connection now felt like a beacon drawing shadows. Sleep evaded her that night, the bed creaking under restless turns, moonlight filtering through lace curtains to paint silver streaks on the walls. Dreams wove in fragments, Ethan's calloused hand on hers under the oak, the crew's laughter like distant thunder, Tommy's truck looming like a storm cloud. Dawn broke with a hesitant glow, the sun rising sluggish over the hills, gilding the dew on the grass in fragile gold. Olivia rose early, pulling on boots that crunched against the frost-kissed earth as she tended the garden. The soil yielded under her spade. Cool and yielding, a small act of control amid the uncertainty, but as she straightened, wiping dirt from her hands, the familiar rumble approached, not the full convoy, but a single engine, steady and approaching like a heartbeat. Ethan pulled up at the garden's edge, dismounting with fluid grace, his leather jacket zipped against the morning chill. Dust settled around his boots, carrying the faint scent of highway asphalt and pine from the roads beyond. "Couldn't stay away," he said, a half smile softening the lines of his face. "Heard from Riley, picked up extra shingles from a contact up north. Figured we'd get a head start before the crew rolls in. His eyes scanned her face, reading the shadows beneath, the tension etched in her posture. No questions, just the quiet offer of presence, like a shield forged in silence. Gratitude swelled in her chest, mingling with the vulnerability his nearness evoked. "Tommy called last night, warning me off you all, like you're the trouble." She met his gaze, the words spilling out unfiltered, the garden's earthy aroma grounding her. Ethan's jaw tightened, a flicker of old resolve hardening his features. He stepped closer, the space between them charged with the subtle heat of shared secrets. Tommy's kind run in every town, guard their turf with words sharper than nails. But the iron vow, we don't bend to that. My brother's promise taught me, stand for what's right, even if it draws fire. They worked side by side through the morning, Ethan climbing to inspect the patches, Olivia feeding him tools from below, their rhythm syncing like an unspoken duet. The sun warmed the air, birdsong punctuating the hammer's steady thuds, but beneath it, conversation deepened. Ethan shared more of his scars, not the visible ones, but the weight of a war that had stolen his brother, leaving a vow etched in grief, to protect the overlooked, to build what others tore down. Rode alone after that, till the crew found me. They became the family I chose, loyalty that don't fade with miles. His voice carried the gravel of highways, but softened when he turned to her. You remind me of that promise, Olivia, strong in the quiet ways. Her heart stuttered at the admission, the ladder between them a fragile barrier. As he descended for lunch, their hands brushed, deliberate this time, lingering in the warmth of midday sun. Under the oak once more, sharing sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, the world narrowed to the rustle of leaves and the depth in his eyes. I've been mocked for wanting this, for believing in more than just getting by, she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. But with you here, it feels possible. Ethan's hand covered hers fully now, thumb tracing a gentle circle, the touch igniting a quiet fire that chased away the morning's chill. In that suspended moment, the farm's shadows receded, replaced by the bloom of something tender, unmocked. A love emerging from the ruins of doubt. Yet as the afternoon waned, the rumble of approaching bikes heralded the crew's return. Their arrival a timely reinforcement. Riley clapped Olivia on the shoulder, Marcus hauling fresh supplies with a grin. The work surged forward, laughter weaving through the labor, but Tommy's call lingered like a distant thunderhead. Ethan caught her eye across the yard, his nod a silent vow. Whatever storms brewed in Willow Creek, they'd face them together. The roof rose stronger, mirroring the alliance taking root, but the town's whispers hinted at trials ahead, grudges that could unravel threads of trust, forcing choices between isolation and the risky embrace of chosen bonds. As the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in fiery hues, Olivia felt the pull of redemption. Not just for the farm, but for a heart long guarded, now daring to ride toward the light. If this chapter's warmth is stirring something in you, please hit that like button. It helps spread these stories of quiet courage to more hearts out there. The evening sun bled crimson across the Willow Creek horizon, its rays slicing through the canopy of the old oak like fingers probing hidden wounds. Olivia stood at the edge of the yard, watching the Iron Vow crew disperse into the gathering dusk, their engines fading into a harmonious growl that blended with the chorus of cicadas. The air hung heavy with the scent of sawdust and fresh sealant, a tangible mark of progress on the farmhouse that now stood as a bastion against the encroaching night. Ethan's gaze lingered on her from his saddle, a silent tether pulling at the space between them before he nodded once and rode off with the others, leaving the gravel path scarred with tire tracks like veins pulsing with unspoken intent. Inside, the kitchen felt alive in a way it hadn't since her mother's laughter had filled its corners years ago. Olivia moved through the motions of clearing the day's remnants, stacking tools by the door, wiping counters dusted with flour and grit, the simple tasks grounding her amid the swirl of emotions. The warmth of Ethan's touch under the oak replayed in her mind, a gentle anchor that steadied the storm Tommy's call had stirred. But doubt crept in with the shadows, whispering of the town's unyielding grip. How long could outsiders' kindness withstand the weight of local grudges? She poured a glass of water from the sink, the cool liquid steadying her hands, and gazed out the window, where fireflies began their ethereal dance, mirroring the fragile sparks igniting within her. Sleep came fitfully, fractured by dreams of rumbling engines and mocking voices that twisted into thunder. Dawn arrived with a deceptive calm, the sky a pale wash of blue unbroken by clouds, the air crisp with the promise of another day's labor. Olivia rose with the rooster's call, pulling on a flannel shirt that carried the faint trace of Ethan's borrowed jacket from the day before, leather and oil, a scent that evoked roads untaken and vows unbroken. She stepped into the yard, the dew-soaked grass clinging to her boots, and began weeding the garden, each pull a small rebellion against the uncertainty gnawing at her edges. The farm was more than land now. It was a canvas for the redemption she sought, painted with the hands of those who'd chosen to stand beside her. The rumble returned mid-morning, not the full convoy, but Ethan's solitary approach, his Harley cutting through the mist like a blade through silk. He dismounted with that familiar grace, toolkit slung over one shoulder, his eyes finding hers immediately across the yard. "Brought the last of the flashing, should seal those valleys for good," he said, his voice a low rumble that matched the engine's echo. No mention of the previous day's closeness, but it hummed beneath the surface. In the way his shoulder brushed hers as they walked to the house, in the shared silence that felt like complicity. They worked in tandem, the ladder a bridge between their worlds. Ethan scaled the peak with ease, his boots thudding rhythmically against the rungs, while Olivia steadied from below, passing up strips of metal that gleamed like promises forged in fire. The sun climbed, warming the shingles under their hands, sweat tracing paths down Ethan's neck as he hammered the flashing into place. From her vantage, Olivia watched the play of muscles across his back, the tattoos peeking from his rolled sleeves, faded symbols of battles past, each one a chapter in the story he'd only begun to share. "You ever think about settling?" she asked. The words slipping out amid the wind's soft sigh carried on the scent of pine tar and sun-baked earth. He paused, hammer mid-swing, glancing down with a shadow crossing his features. "Road's been my anchor too long, but promises have a way of rerouting you." His admission hung between them, heavy with the weight of his brother's legacy, the iron vow, born from grief and grit. A brotherhood that had pulled him from solitude only to remind him of what he'd lost. Olivia felt the parallel keenly, her own vow to her mother echoing in the quiet labor, to build a life rooted in love, not just endurance. As he descended for a break, their eyes met in the dappled shade of the oak, the air thickening with the unspoken pull drawing them closer. Lunch unfolded under the tree's embrace, a simple spread of cheese and bread on a blanket, the leaves whispering overhead like confidants. Ethan's knee grazed hers as they sat, a deliberate proximity that sent a quiet thrill through her. "Tommy's not done," she said softly, breaking the bread with hands that trembled slightly. "His call last night. It felt like more than talk. Like he's got pull here, ways to make life harder." Ethan's jaw set, his fingers closing around hers in reassurance, calluses rough yet tender against her skin. Seen his type before, men who bully to feel big. But the vows faced worse. "We stand, Olivia. For the farm, for you." The words wrapped around her like armor, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that blurred the line between ally and something deeper, a love budding in the fertile soil of shared scars. The afternoon brought the crew back in force, bikes arriving in a thunderous wave that scattered birds from the fields. Riley and Marcus dove into the final touches, their banter lightening the air, but an undercurrent of vigilance threaded through their movements, eyes flicking to the road, hands never far from tools that could double as weapons. As the roof neared completion, a shadow fell across the yard. Not Tommy's truck, but a sleek black sedan, official-looking with tinted windows that gleamed ominously in the sunlight. It pulled up slow, dust swirling like a warning, and out stepped a man in a crisp shirt and badge, Sheriff Harlan, Mrs. Harlan's brother, his face etched with the stern lines of authority long corrupted by small-town favors. "Evening, folks," he drawled, his gaze sweeping the group with thinly veiled suspicion, lingering on the bikes like they were intruders. "Got reports of disturbances out here, noise complaints, unauthorized work on a historic structure." His tone carried the weight of Tommy's influence, the reports a thinly veiled threat wrapped in procedure. Olivia's stomach knotted, the sandwich turning to ash in her mouth. But Ethan rose smoothly, stepping forward with hands open, non-threatening. "Just fixing a roof, Sheriff. Owner's permission, all above board, no disturbance meant." Harlan's eyes narrowed, flicking to Olivia. "Heard you've been entertaining some rough company, Miss Harper. Town's got rules, permits for this kind of thing." Reynolds mentioned concerns about safety. The implications stung, painting the iron vow as threats, her budding connection as folly. The crew shifted subtly, Riley's hand on her hip, Marcus's quiet stance, but no aggression, only the solid wall of loyalty. Olivia found her voice, stepping beside Ethan, her hand brushing his arm for strength. "The roof was leaking, Sheriff. These people helped when no one else would. If there's paperwork, I'll handle it, but this is my home." The sheriff paused, the air taut as a bowstring, the distant hum of traffic underscoring the standoff. Finally, he nodded curtly, retreating to his car with a parting shot. "Keep it clean, or we'll have to look closer." The sedan crunched away, leaving a pall over the yard, but the crew exhaled collectively, resuming work with renewed purpose. Ethan pulled Olivia aside near the barn, his voice low against the fading echo. "That was a test. They'll push, but we push back, with truth, not fists." His hand cupped her cheek then, thumb tracing her jaw, the touch igniting a fire that chased the fear. In that stolen moment, lips nearly brushing, the world narrowed to the beat of their hearts, a kiss deferred but inevitable, sealing a vow of their own. As dusk painted the sky in deepening indigos, the roof stood complete, a sturdy shield against whatever storms brewed. The crew shared a final meal on the porch, stories of past rides weaving bonds tighter than any nail. Ethan stayed after they left, sitting with Olivia under the stars, the night air alive with possibility. Yet the sheriff's visit lingered like smoke, hinting at escalating shadows. Tommy's web ran deeper, threatening not just the farm, but the fragile love taking root. Olivia leaned into Ethan's shoulder, the warmth of him a bulwark, as the creek murmured below. A testament that redemption demanded courage, and love, once kindled, would not be easily extinguished. But the road ahead twisted, promising confrontations that would demand every ounce of their chosen family's steel. The night air wrapped around the farmhouse like a velvet cloak, thick with the scent of cooling earth and the faint, acrid tang of distant rain on the horizon. Olivia leaned against Ethan's shoulder on the porch steps, the wood still warm from the day's sun, her fingers interlaced with his in a quiet claim that spoke louder than words. Above them, stars pierced the indigo sky like scattered diamonds, indifferent witnesses to the fragile peace they'd carved from Willow Creek's unyielding soil. The sheriff's sedan had long vanished down the gravel road, its taillights swallowed by the dark, but its shadow lingered, a reminder that Tommy's influence coiled deeper than idle threats, twisting through the town's veins like roots choking a garden. Ethan's breath was steady against her hair, his arm a solid anchor amid the uncertainty. "We'll face it head on," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her, echoing the engines that had first drawn him here. "The vow doesn't run from shadows." She nodded, the motion small but resolute, her heart swelling with the weight of his nearness. In the days since his arrival, the farm had transformed, not just in beams and shingles, but in the invisible architecture of trust. Laughter from the crew's meals had filled the empty rooms, their stories weaving a tapestry of chosen kin that mended her isolation more surely than any tool. Yet as crickets sang their nocturnal chorus, Olivia felt the pull of vulnerability, love, once a mocked dream, now bloomed real and raw, demanding defense against the cynicism that bred men like Tommy. Dawn broke with a hesitant blush, the sun cresting the hills to gild the completed roof in molten light, its surface unmarred and steadfast. Olivia stirred eggs in the kitchen, the sizzle a comforting rhythm, while Ethan loaded his bike with final supplies outside. The crew would return soon, but for now, the morning was theirs, a stolen interlude before the storm. He stepped in, wiping his hands on his jeans, and pulled her into a gentle embrace, his lips brushing her forehead in a kiss that sealed the unspoken vow between them. "You're stronger than this place knows," he said, eyes locking with hers, the depth there reflecting battles won and losses honored. In that moment, the kitchen's warmth enveloped them, the scent of coffee and promise chasing away the night's doubts. But Willow Creek's undercurrents surged by midday. As the crew arrived in a thunderous wave, Riley's bike leading with a whoop, Marcus hauling crates of sealant, the black sedan reappeared, this time flanked by Tommy's truck, its bed loaded with what looked like official paperwork flapping in the breeze. Sheriff Harlan emerged first, badge glinting like a false star, his face set in the hard lines of authority bent to favor. Tommy followed, arms crossed over his chest, a smirk curling his lips as he eyed the bikes arrayed like a defiant phalanx. "Miss Harper," the sheriff began, his voice clipped and procedural. Inspections turned up issues, structural concerns, unpermitted modifications. This farm's under review. Could mean fines, or worse, if it's deemed unsafe. The air thickened, tension coiling like smoke from a hidden fire. Olivia's pulse hammered, the eggs turning cold on the stove behind her, but she stepped forward, flanked by Ethan and the crew, their presence a wall of quiet steel. "Unsafe. You saw it leaking. Now it's solid. These folks fixed what the town ignored." Tommy chuckled, leaning against his truck, the sound grating like gravel under tires. "Town ignored? We offered help, but you called in these road rats, stirring trouble, making noise. Folks are scared, Olivia. Chasing your fairy tale's gonna cost you this place." His words dripped with the poison of old grudges, rooted in a history Olivia only half knew. The Reynolds family's claim on land like hers, bought cheap through whispers and withheld aid, preserving their mechanic empire by keeping neighbors small. Ethan's hand found hers, a subtle squeeze that grounded her fury. The crew shifted, Riley's eyes sharp, Marcus's fists unclenching deliberately. But no aggression, only the poised readiness of those bound by iron oaths. "Sheriff," Ethan said evenly, his drawl cutting through the standoff like a steady engine, "we've got receipts for every nail, every shingle. No harm done, just help given free. If it's permits you want, we'll file 'em proper, but threats disguised as law, that don't hold water." Harlan's gaze flickered, uncertainty cracking his facade as the crew's unity pressed against his borrowed power. Tommy's smirk faltered, the weight of outsiders' resolve exposing the fragility of his bluster. The confrontation stretched, the sun beating down on the yard like an impartial judge, dust motes dancing in the heated air. Olivia drew a breath, her voice rising clear and unyielding. "This farm's my home, my mother's promise to me, and mine to her. You mock my hope, Tommy, but it's you who's afraid of kindness that doesn't bend to your rules." The words landed like hammer strikes, echoing the rhythm of their labor. And for the first time, Tommy's eyes darted away, the sheriff clearing his throat awkwardly. Whispers from the crew underscored the moment. Riley murmuring support, Marcus nodding like a sentinel, but it was the moral clarity that tipped the scales, the truth of loyalty, outshining corruption's dim light. Harlan hesitated, glancing at Tommy with a flicker of doubt, then backpedaled. "We'll review the paperwork. Keep it quiet. No more complaints." He retreated to his car, Tommy following with a muttered curse. Their vehicles kicking up gravel in hasty defeat, the yard exhaled, the crew erupting in low cheers, hands clapping shoulders in celebration of justice, poetic and earned. Olivia turned to Ethan, tears pricking her eyes not from fear, but release. The farm secure, her heart affirmed. He pulled her close, their lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of tar and triumph, deep and unhurried, sealing the bond forged in sweat and silence. As the afternoon waned, the crew lingered for a final toast under the oak, mugs of cider raised to vows kept and families chosen. Stories flowed like the creek below, tales of rides that mended more than machines, of promises that outlasted roads. Ethan watched Olivia laugh with Riley, her face alight in the golden light, and felt the pull of roots he'd long evaded. "This place," he said later as stars emerged once more, "it's got you in its bones. And me, I'm staying to help tend it." She smiled, leaning into him, the night alive with the hum of possibility. Willow Creek's shadows receded, Tommy's web unraveled by the light of integrity, leaving the farmhouse a beacon of redemption. Love, no longer mocked, stood roofed in honor, a legacy of sacrifice and quiet courage, where chosen kin rode eternal. The wind whispered through the eaves, carrying the faint rumble of futures intertwined, promising that in a world of broken words, some bonds endure unbreakable. If this tale of unexpected love and unyielding loyalty has touched your heart, thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of redemption and chosen family. Hit that button, and let's keep these northern confessions riding far.